Joining me on today's episode to chat is Matt Formeller, who is a partner at Formeller Formeller, a boutique corporate law firm in Chicago, Illinois. Thanks so much for joining today, Matt.
Hey, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, so Matt and I have gotten to know each other over the years. He's helped me out a lot with my small business, and I know that he has been a great resource for all different kinds of businesses, and they themselves are a small business. So there's a lot that goes into the effects that are happening right now because of the pandemic. And I was wondering, Matt, if you could just tell us a little bit about you and the firm and kind of what work you do.
So, as you said, we're a boutique corporate law firm in Chicago, and primarily what we do is about two-thirds of our practice is serving as outside general counsel to a number of small, medium-sized companies. And what that essentially means is we're the legal arm of our client's business, and that means all sorts of things actually, but essentially what we do is we work with clients that are starting new businesses, running existing businesses, and then at the end of their life cycle, either buying or selling new businesses or selling their existing companies. And then a third of our business is commercial litigation, where we represent businesses and business owners in commercial disputes.
So, as this pandemic has hit the world, what types of things right off the bat have you had to really veer into different directions and at least even just basically working from home and being able to support your clients all while courts are not open?
It took some getting used to because the first few weeks, I felt like I was in triage mode where a number of our clients were calling with all sorts of questions related to sort of navigating through uncharted territory. What if I can't meet this expected deadline? What if I can't fulfill this contract? What if I can't meet my supply chain obligations? Um, how do I get out of this obligation? So a lot of questions we were fielding from clients, where I was spending a lot of time on the phone for the first probably 2 weeks of this quarantine, sort of not only just providing advice to clients, but comforting clients as well, because we were all in this together where there's a lot of uncertainty. And so apart from that, yes, because a third of our business is litigation, the federal courts are still, while they're closed physically, they're still having certain types of hearings, and they're doing it through Zoom or telephone. The state court's a different story. And so a lot of our cases that are in the circuit courts of Cook County here in Chicago are at a standstill because while we're expected to continue on with certain parts or mechanical processes in litigation, we can't really do anything because there's no court oversight, no intervention, and until the courts reopen, it's really just slowed down to a crawl.
So, what are you, maybe tell me a little bit more in depth of what kind of things you're doing for yourself as a small business and organization, and also your clients right now after the beginning of this to kind of maintain anything from advice on PPP loans, which I know are important to making sure you and your clients are set up as best they can during this time.
It's one of the biggest questions I've been asked by clients is the PPP funding questions and how do I apply and who should I apply through and what documents should I use to support my loan? And I've been telling everyone, well, I'm not an accountant, I'm not a banker, so I can't provide some of that. However, from personal experience, it was number one, I think it's important if you qualify to try to get it because while especially here in Illinois, the stay-at-home order has been extended through May, and nobody knows if we're really going to be let out in June, and nobody really knows when things are going to get back to what we define as normal from before. And so the purpose of that funding is to keep people on the payroll so that you don't have to lay off a lot of people while we wait this out. And so number one, I've been trying to give clients as much information related to, like I'm sort of a pass through where I'm gathering as much information as I can about this stuff and sending it to clients in client emails where we're blasting out to our clients some resources, because as we've always sort of explained to clients, we're not just your legal partners. We are um, we try to be brokers of people as well. We have these deep networks and relationships, and if we can leverage some of those relationships to help them through this, we can make connections to different lenders or different accountants, or at least at the very least just provide resources to clients. I think that's a big help. And the other thing we're really focusing on is, once the triage issues are dealt with, once the client feels like, okay, I'm out of the woods, so to speak, with some of the immediate issues, let's plan for post-pandemic operations. Let's start to plan for some smart things you can do operationally in your contracts, risk management, some things forward to make this a little bit easier, because this has already happened once and it can happen again. And one of my famous phrases I use with clients, and you've heard it yourself, I always say, I never assume the worst is going to happen. I just plan for it. And now this is foreseeable. So let's plan for this moving forward.
And with that planning, have you changed the way you communicate or reach out? I mean, I know from experience in working with you, we did a lot via the phone and internet. So that communication might be similar, but are there other things that you've had to look at differently as this has gone on technologically?
We've always prided ourselves on being progressively, or technologically progressive. Our firm has been paperless for 7 or 8 years, where we've never really relied on, having to be in a physical office location in order to do work. But we do have this location in the Sears Tower, the will. We are able to essentially get everything we need done for clients remotely if we have to. But this has brought a whole new meaning to remote work, because all of our interfacing now, I've used Zoom in the past and Skype and some of those things, but now I'm using it every day. And first things first, when I'm meeting with clients, I tend to do it over the phone because of the Zoom security issues. My communications with clients are privileged. And so in the off chance that there is somebody listening or somebody, hacking it, don't want them hearing our privileged conversations, puts clients at ease. But just for general communication, I've been, texting a little bit more, and I typically only text certain clients. And it's not because I choose like favorite clients to text. It's just some are prefer that over others, or some are more accessible that way. Um, but really, it's interesting. I think we're all getting used to this, and I think post quarantine, we're all going to realize maybe we don't all have to be, tethered to a specific office location 5 days a week.
For sure, and I think I'm guessing it sounds like what you're saying is you're kind of differentiating or changing up how you communicate with different people based on A, the security, but B, maybe you're trying to figure out what their comfort level is also with technology. So that's probably a whole other thing that you're working through.
And some people just aren't comfortable with video chat, and I get it. As my best friend has been saying, that the world is going to be run by the bald and the bland after this, because we're all just kind of looking more and more haggard every day. And so I've had some clients that are like, no offense, I just don't want you to see me right now. And I always say, well, I'm one to talk, looking like Marv from Home Alone more and more every day. So
That's great. And tell me a little bit, if you're comfortable with it, about your experience with the PPP loans for your own business and kind of what you've gone through, maybe some insight that could help others.
So for us, because we don't have a formal payroll because we're a partnership, and so for tax purposes, we're self-employed, and we had to wait until April 10th to apply, because you had to have a payroll in order to apply on I think it was like the 2nd of April, or I think so, or the 4th, whichever date that was. So the following week we applied, and at first it was very difficult because I think the administration didn't really release much guidance for applicants or lenders in terms of how to apply what you need to support your payroll number. And that term payroll number is essentially what do the partners pay themselves. And, I talked to other partnerships that have staff that are W-2s and payrolled, and they were having the same issues I was, which is how do you substantiate the partner compensation? How do you show that? And so it took some trial and error. And, I think if you are a company, with a payroll, it's a fairly straightforward process. You submit your payroll documents because they should show mostly what people are being paid in the company and whatever the associated payroll costs are. So if there's a group health insurance plan, that sort of thing. And then for us, it was essentially we had to submit tax documents because once I submitted my K-1 for my partnership, that's when they accepted our application. And I will say the smaller the lender that you're applying through, typically the easier the process. So a lot of my clients that have been going through banks like Chase, Wells Fargo, not a very successful pursuit because everyone's been hearing the stories and I can't obviously back up any of those claims, but the assumption is because the bigger companies that have lines of credits are sort of getting preferential treatment and leapfrogging. But banks that are either regional banks, chartered banks, smaller banks, almost every single one of my clients that applied through those types of lenders had zero issues, pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah, it's in my experience in talking with a lot of people, all but one that got it ended up going that route with the smaller banks, that they had a little bit more access. The ones that were able to get it through the bigger banks had a really good pre-existing relationship or knowledge base already there with a banker, which was able to help them get things through. So it's definitely a bit, yeah, it's definitely interesting in having to navigate through this, especially, just in the beginning, understanding, do you have to pay it back? Do you not have to pay it back? I think like you were saying earlier, it's been interesting to see, interesting, maybe the wrong word, I'm not sure which is right, difficult with so many different thoughts out there of what you can and can't do. So hopefully it seems like
Sure.
people, at least the second time around, are getting a little more assistance.
One extra tip is a lot of my clients that are getting the funding are being advised to open a separate bank account just for those funds because then it's easier to document the usage so that if you're aiming for it to be a forgivable grant, because you're going to use 75% or more on payroll, if you open up a separate bank account with your lender for those funds to sit in, you can much easier track the ins and outs of the funds. And so that's just something I've been hearing a lot. And myself receiving the PPP funds, that's what we were advised to do as well.
That makes a lot of sense, helping to separate, in this time to really make it easier to identify where everything is coming from. Seems really, really smart. And what about, you and your sister are partners at the firm. How are you handling it individually and together with your families being at home and trying to make this work?
It's been great, and it's been difficult and challenging. I mean, what I'm enjoying first and foremost is I haven't worn anything more formal than sweatpants in like a month and a half in sweats. Like I'm wearing my Jordan hoodie all the time, and I do wash it. But it's nice to be able to be home with my kids. So I have two kids, as you know. I have a 4.5-year-old son and a 2.5-year-old son, and then my wife's pregnant with our third son right now, who's due in August. And so, one, it's nice that I'm home because I can help a little bit during the day when things are a little bit more difficult for my wife because the longer this goes on, the more and more pregnant she becomes. So I can offer some relief. But at the same time, it is challenging because my kids are my older son is typically in preschool 5 days a week, half a day, and he's not at school. He's not regulated. It's a little bit challenging to as I said before, kids are creatures of habit. And you're removing sort of all their habitual daily practices and what they're used to, and throwing them into this world where like dad's home all the time. Both my kids ask me all the time, Dad, why are you here during the day? Because they're not used to it. And so getting work done is a little bit difficult. I wear headphones most of the day because my office is a, sort of an open floor concept. You can't see behind the computer, but my kids like to hang out in front of my desk and just stare at me while I'm working half the time. And I have a baby gate installed, so they just ring their milk cups on the gate like they're in jail and wait for me to let them in. But when I'm on call or a Zoom, I typically have to retreat to our bedroom and shut the door so that I can get some privacy without them. One thing I'm, noticing about being at home like this is, first off, my my ability to be flexible is increased. So my workday isn't as rigid as it was before, where I'm at work from this time to this time. It's kind of like throughout the day. And then once the kids are asleep, I'm working when they're asleep a little bit. And I'm more accessible in a way because of that. So clients enjoy that. And then, from a business development standpoint, I'm noticing it's actually easier to meet people right now than it has been in the past, because scheduling isn't really an issue. Where you used to say, oh, I'm going to meet you for coffee next time I'm downtown. It'll be in 3 weeks or a month or whatever the case is. Now people are saying, hey, it's great to meet you. Thanks for the introduction, so-and-so. Let's get on a Zoom in 3 days. Let's get on a Zoom by the end of this week, or let's do a phone call. So that's all great. Now my sister, who's my law partner, she she lives in an apartment downtown, and so she actually elected to come back, and she's living right now at my parents' house with my other sister and her kids, and they're all quarantining and staying together. So she has some people to be around. But from a practical standpoint, it's funny, we're still is Brad, you can attest, I get yelled at a lot by my sister throughout the day. It's a great dynamic, but she's still able to do that. It's just virtual now. So we're we're still operating the same way.
That's great. And it kind of to maybe wrap up, and you've just been talking about this, of how you're operating and how some of these things might be easier. And I know we're taking it a day at a time and don't know what will come next, but what else have you learned, or what else are you thinking about going forward to either get through this or come out of it on the other side?
So I think like connecting with people is more important now than ever, where nobody knows how long this is going to last. They're saying, obviously, like, once a vaccine is produced, we can finally get over this, and who knows when that will be and if that will be. So my concern is, the longer this goes on, the more difficult it becomes for people to continue to operate and do business together. And at some point, I think we'll see more government intervention. I think we're going to see more adjustments to alleviate this to a degree for people. But my philosophy has always been, and our firm is almost 9 years old, and a lawyer told me when I started my practice some great advice. She told me, if you're not doing work, you should be finding work. And I've always kind of adopted that and used that, where, if I'm not actually sitting at my desk doing work for clients, I'm trying to go out and meet new people and develop new business. So I think now more than ever, it's more important to maintain that habit and be accountable and say, look, I'm spending, it's easy when you're home in kind of in this relaxed atmosphere to take your foot off the gas. But I think now is the time to really push the pedal a little bit. And obviously you can't just create work out of thin air, but developing authentic relationships now will pay dividends later, and you never know. And so, my sister and I are doing this thing. We try to have these accountability meetings a few times a week and say, okay, what's on your plate? What's on my plate? From a business development standpoint, who are you meeting? Who am I meeting? Who should we connect these people with? Who would be connected because I'm wanting to make sure that I can do my best to connect anybody and everyone I can where it's a useful connection.
And I think that's something that you've always been so good at, and you've helped me in that regard because you've always been almost, in some ways, a general contractor of knowing so many different types of people and really helping the businesses and that you work with and the clients if they need an accountant, if they need insurance, and anything. And I think that's great, and I know I appreciated it, and I hope that continues to work for you guys. And I really appreciate you coming on and providing some really great insight. And I hope this continues to get better and your business and your clients find success through this and can weather it.
Yeah, thanks. Absolutely.